a biennial budget, the baseline forecast. We have now taken revenue and transfers out of the general fund of about $7 billion. Now, when you're talking about general fund, total of about $35 billion for the biennium is a large percent just on the revenues, and this is just revenue. It has nothing to do with spending demands like Medicaid, and where we've got demands going up because of recessionary pressure. So this is pure revenue. If you look at a budgetary gap, it would be much higher than this, looking at the current spending needs. So again, we've adjusted a lot in this budget, and it's unprecedented in terms of anything we've faced in history. Looking at it going out, you can see this is a forecast. With that 1.2 out of the O10, it nets to a -1.6, and I'll talk about some policy considerations that make it 1.6. But with that in mind, it's the first time since the Great Depression that we didn't have back-to-back losses in revenue. You can see in modern history, our records go back to about 60, and you can see nothing like it. The 9.2% in 2009 was about 3 times what it was in 2002 under Governor Warner. Back in '91, it was 0.4% under Governor Wilder. I had the pleasure of dealing with that recession too. The more important thing is looking at what happens when the state does rebound. After 2 years of sort of negative losses in revenue, we are projecting as a state some slow growth. But even with that, if you look at where we would be in 12, it is below where we actually were in FY07. So it's like you rolled the hands of time back 5 years in terms of revenue. And if you look at governmental services, you know, it's not possible to roll governmental services back. You know, I can't roll Medicaid back 5 years. So it presents right from the very get-go major budget challenges for elected officials. I'm not going to say much about the governor's plan, other than to say that in August, when we addressed this 135, we tried to protect localities in K-12. You were in the middle of a budget year. And disproportionately, the cuts fell on state services. 15% cuts on higher education, closing of correctional facilities, some one-time actions. And those one-time actions were necessary sort of to stabilize and get out of the year. But relatively speaking, the cuts fell on that side of the ledger, not on the intergovernmental side or local governments. This is just on, if you look at this chart that I've included in there, it's sort of the thumbnail sketch of what was done in August on the governor's plan. Not going to go into any detail on this, other than to say that if you look at these actions, going down, you see agency cuts, primarily in state services, but you see a lot of one-time actions. There's no doubt about that. I don't apologize for that. It was part of what we were trying to do to just stabilize the situation until we could get longer-term cuts in place and not have to throw a lot of disruption in the intergovernmental arena during a time of sort of mid-budget when a quarter of the year was gone. So how are we doing now that we've taken money out? You can see in this page, I had mentioned the adjusted forecast, -1.6. That's affected by 2 policy considerations. A tax amnesty program that's going on now. Will be done until early December. It's about $40 million estimated in the budget for that. And a change in the sales tax remittance. Normally, a retail merchant collecting sales tax would collect sales tax for, say, a whole month and then have to deposit to the state by the 20th of the next month. Starting in June, they will not only deposit the May tax that they collected, but the first 15 days of June to the Commonwealth. And then the cycle will change from July will be from June 16th to July 15th. So it makes the collection more real-time, and it has effect, about $70 million effect on revenues. If you take those two things out of the forecast, they really haven't happened yet. That money is not in the general fund at all at this stage of the game. The adjusted forecast comes minus 2.6, and that is sort of the economic forecast that you need to compare to. Through September, the first quarter of the year, we stand at about 7.4% negative. So we're running substantially behind that forecast at this stage of the game. Now, the sources that sort of bother me in advising the governor between now and December 17th, when we make this budget, are these, as you well imagine. First of all, it's withholding, the biggest one, 60%. As I mentioned last year, we stayed about 6% plus in withholding until we collapsed in the second part of the year. What was to happen this year was almost put that in the mirror, where you started at low, gained speed in the fall as the labor markets started to stabilize, drop, and grow again. The problem here is the trend is all right. It is exactly what you want to see going towards a forecast of 2.1%. We're currently at minus 2.3. The question is, are we too far down in the hole to make that forecast? And there's nothing that's going to prove that plus or minus until except time. We're waiting with anxious breath on October numbers. I will get those officially towards the end of the week. I get daily deposits. As I look at daily deposits, there is nothing hopeful in daily deposits that would lead me to believe that the situation is fundamentally changing, or that somehow we are back on track with maybe the forecast. So I think the risk here is on the downside on withholding in terms of adjustment for December. On the non-withholding side, last year we lost about 25% on non-withholding. We had an estimate of about minus 17% for the year. Our payments made non-withholding quarterly. The first fiscal year quarterly payment was made September 15th, and that was off about 27%. Not unusual, because people are, this whole harmless clause on non-withholding on estimated payments. People reset it after that big decline in the spring, so some of that is a holdover. The question here remains whether there will be, with growth in the stock market, with a little bit improving economy, to absorb some of the rollover losses, will there be any gain by the time we get to January on the quarterly payments? And that could easily happen. It has happened before. There's nothing here that's sort of out of the range for that happening. The problem is that as you look at this chart, we don't get any more information on it until late December for the early filers for January 15th, and then in January. So we have very little information to go on other than what we have, and that's that September quarterly payment. After a 9% shortfall last year, another negative projected in all the stress on cash and Commonwealth balance sheet. The question here is, how much risk can we take?